I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, new leaders. The U.S. bishops choose a new president and vice president today. We have a report from Baltimore. Same-sex agenda. The Senate's leader wants so-called marriage equality to become law. We have analysis. True conversion. In part 2 of our conversation with Ollie London, how he discovered Christ after his experience with gender surgeries. And an uplifting story. New developments in NASA's rocket headed to the moon. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on this feast of St. Albert the Great. We begin tonight in Baltimore, where U.S. bishops have elected Archbishop Timothy Broglio of the Archdiocese of the Military Services USA as the group's new president. The session opened earlier with remarks by the Apostolic Nuncio to the U.S.
The Holy Father challenges us not only to accompany others in their spiritual journey, but also in their human journey. We are well aware of the brokenness of the human family and the demands of Catholic teaching, particularly in the domain of morality.
The remarks by Archbishop Christophe Pierre were followed by a speech by outgoing President Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles addressing the challenges of building up the church in our times. We go now to Catherine Hadro, EWTN News contributor who is in Baltimore now for us. Catherine, great to see you. So what more can you tell us about the vote for president and vice president, and also tell us more about Archbishop Broglio?
Yes, well, today's the big day. We have learned who the next president of the USCCB will be, and that is Archbishop Broglio. As you mentioned, it took 3 rounds of electronic voting to find out who the president would be, and it ultimately came to a runoff between Archbishop Broglio and Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore, because you need to receive at least 119 votes to be named president, and Broglio ultimately won that. The bishops then immediately voted for vice president, and after a few electronic glitches, Archbishop Lori won against, ultimately, Bishop Kevin Rhodes. Now, this is pretty interesting for a few reasons. Number one, Archbishop Lori currently serves as chair of the pro-life committee, which means tomorrow the bishops will need to elect a new chair of the pro-life committee. It's also interesting because it's pretty customary for vice presidents of the USCCB to maybe become the next president. However, Archbishop Lori will age out of that opportunity. He will not be able to become the next president of the USCCB after serving a 3-year term as vice president. So that is also noteworthy. I spoke with Archbishop Lori earlier today about his role as pro-life chair. That'll air a little bit later, and it was before he was elected vice president. Now, Archbishop Broglio, it's no surprise he was elected president. He was seen as a front runner and a likely successor. A little bit more information about him. He's been serving as the head of the Archbishop for Military Services since 2008, and he's been a vocal defender for religious liberty protections for the military, especially during COVID and all that brought with it. And so we now join our prayers for Archbishop Broglio.
Absolutely. And outgoing President Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles has led the USCCB for the past 3 years. He gave a presidential address today. I'm curious, Catherine, what stood out to you about that?
Yes, that's right. And just to pause and reflect on Archbishop Gomez's term these past 3 years, he was elected in the fall of 2019. So think of all that has happened in this country since then. We had the COVID-19 pandemic, which was unprecedented, the 2020 election, and all the political strife that has brought with it since. Archbishop Gomez has led the U.S. bishops through all of that these past 3 years. And in a press conference he held here for the reporters who are here reporting on the conference, he admitted it's had its share of challenges, and he was going to to be praying for his successor, who we now know is Archbishop Broglio. But what stood out to me during his presidential commencement was really his closing statement. It was this quote of Bishop Baraga, and he said, "Let us have one desire, to be where God wants us to be and to do what God wants us to do." It had that missionary spirit to it, and it was immediately followed by a standing ovation from his brother bishops. Archbishop Gomez started his presidency with a lot of support from his brother bishops, and it really seems that he ended in that same way.
Catherine, almost out of time, but really quickly, what's on the docket for tomorrow?
Yes, well, it's the final day of public sessions. It will be packed. As I mentioned, we'll have that election for the next pro-life chair and also the election for other committee chairmen as well. There will also be a discussion on faithful citizenship, which could prove to be very interesting.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Catherine, thank you so much. We appreciate it. With control of the U.S. Senate settled, Democrats are making a list of key bills they want passed during this lame duck session of Congress. Government funding, election reform, and raising the debt limit, just to name a few. But a top priority, passing the same-sex marriage bill and protecting abortion access nationwide. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest. Eric?
Well, good evening to you, Tracy. You know, after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and returned the abortion issue back to the states, Democrats made the abortion access issue a top priority in the campaign. Catholic Senator Dick Durbin, the Democrat majority whip, says that the election results prove that Americans want more abortion access, not less.
People don't want politicians, senators, congressmen, you name it, sticking their nose into the business of doctors in the hospitals and clinics across America. So we need to respect the will of the people and protect the right to choose once and for all.
Senator Durbin adds voters in 5 states, California, Michigan, Montana, Kentucky, and Vermont, all passed support for so-called abortion rights. Senate Democrats tell me they will continue to hold votes to codify abortion rights and repeal restrictions. They are also moving ahead to codify same-sex marriage. The Bipartisan Marriage Equality Act passed the House. It repeals the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act, defining marriage as a union of one man and one woman, requires the federal government to recognize marriage between two people, validated by the state where it took place, and safeguards all conscious protections and religious liberties under current law. A bipartisan group of senators say they have enough Republican votes to avoid a filibuster.
No American should ever be discriminated against because of who they love. And passing this bill would secure much-needed safeguards into federal law.
But Republican Senator John Kennedy says he's reading over the bill, but can't find what problem the bill solves.
As I read the United States Supreme Court precedent, gay marriage is legal in America and virtually unrestricted. And so the obvious question becomes, then why do we need a statute?
Some Republicans express concern with this bill. They say the real reason for the bill is to go after faith-based organizations with lawsuits. They say if the bill does pass and a faith-based organization such as the Catholic Church is found to have broken the law, then they could be forced to lose their tax exemptions. First votes are expected as early as tomorrow. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
2-day sentencing has begun for the man found guilty of killing 6 people in a Christmas parade in Wisconsin last year. Today, family members directly addressed Darrell Brooks, with one still mourning the loss of their young child.
My mama's soul aches for him. I am emotionally and mentally exhausted.
That was mother of 8-year-old Jackson Sparks. 6 people died last year and many others were injured after Brooks drove his car through the parade. He is facing 6 consecutive life sentences. The judge is expected to pass down the sentence tomorrow. While President Joe Biden continues his overseas trip attending the G20 summit, former President Donald Trump says he has a major announcement tonight. It is widely believed that he'll be running again for president in 2024. White House correspondent Owen Jensen joins us near Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. Owen?
Hi, Tracy. Good evening. Hi, Tracy. Good evening to you. November 2024, of course, is still 2 years away, and the current midterms are still being decided, including that huge race in Georgia. Now, if former President Trump announces his candidacy for the Oval Office tonight in 2024, well, that could mean a rematch of 2020. And President Joe Biden, currently in Indonesia, has said he intends to run for office.
Overseas at the G20 summit, President Joe Biden delivers remarks at the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment meeting.
As we accelerate our investment and speed transition to clean energy future to meet the climate crisis head on, we have to make sure that they benefit people everywhere, not just in the larger countries.
The price tag in the billions.
Together, we hope to we're mobilizing $20 billion to support Indonesia's efforts to reduce emissions and expand renewable energy.
And while President Biden's trip continues across the globe, all eyes are on the Sunshine State tonight to see what former President Donald Trump has to say. President Trump had hoped to use the GOP's expected gains in last week's elections as a springboard to vault himself to his party's nomination by locking in early support to keep potential challengers at bay. But not everyone is happy to see him run again.
It's basically the third election in a row that Donald Trump has cost us the race, and it's like, 3 strikes, you're out.
Florida, of course, is where Governor Ron DeSantis recently blew out his competitor in the race for governor. He's also seen as a possible presidential contender in 2024. Meanwhile, more pressing for Americans at the moment, inflation. Prices at the wholesale level rose 8% in October from a year ago, but that marks a decline since it was 8.4% in September. The White House released a statement today calling it good news for our economy. We are starting to see inflation moderate, adding it will take time to get inflation back to normal levels, and we could see setbacks along the way, but we will keep at it.
As the former president prepares to launch his third campaign for the White House, former Vice President Mike Pence, he just released a book. It's called So Help Me God, that discusses his former boss, and Mike Pence could be a presidential contender in 2024 as well. As for tonight, we'll be in the room when Donald Trump makes that announcement and have all the reaction for you tomorrow. Reporting in Palm Beach, Florida, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
We have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, discovering his true self. We continue our conversation with Ollie London on his journey from gender confusion to a conversion to Christ. And we hear from the Archbishop of Baltimore at the U.S. Bishops' meeting. Thanks for staying with us. A judge has overturned a ban on most abortions in Georgia. The pro-life measure made abortion illegal after 6 weeks. It had been in effect since July. In its ruling today, the court said the law violated the U.S. Constitution. State officials say they intend to file an immediate appeal. And in Kentucky, the state Supreme Court heard arguments today on a sweeping ban on most abortions. In 2019, Republican lawmakers approved the measure. Last week, voters in Kentucky signaled their support for a pro-abortion ballot initiative. It is unclear what impact, if any, the vote will have on the court's handling of the case. And as we mentioned earlier, a new era for the U.S. bishops as they gather in Baltimore. This year's gathering is the first to occur in a post-Roe nation. At issue, the response to pro-life losses in the wake of last week's election, as well as the obligation to support pregnant women in need. EWTN News contributor Catherine Hadro spoke with Archbishop William Lori before his election this afternoon for his take.
Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore, chair of the U.S. Bishops Pro-Life Committee. Thanks for your time today. Here we are a few months after the Dobbs Supreme Court decision. How would you describe where we're at in the pro-life movement today?
I think we are at a crossroads. Dobbs was a tremendous victory. It ended the legal fiction that there is a constitutional right to an abortion, but it sent it back to our elected representatives to deal with. And we are finding out just how challenging that is. For example, the state referenda that were held recently. I think it is also a reminder of the tremendous work that needs to be done to evangelize and catechize about the gospel of life, and also to to open minds and hearts to the Church's teaching, especially by the love and care we show to mothers who are in need and to their children.
I want to follow up on that. As you mentioned, last week was election week, and we saw multiple abortion ballot initiatives pass. All the pro-life campaigns, unfortunately, failed. Just your reaction to that, and again, how can we change hearts and minds when it comes to those ballot initiatives?
Let me begin with the last question first. I think we have to continually be tilling the soil. Reminding ourselves who preach and those with whom we share the gospel that we belong to one another, that we're united by a common humanity, that inflicting death on others is never the solution to our social problems. I think we have to help people understand the beauty of life, the joy of having children. That's been forgotten in our culture a lot. And so I think we have to continually be tilling the soil of our minds and hearts and planting the seeds of the gospel continually when it's not election time. And so that's number one. Number two, I think that we have to be really willing to bear witness to the value of life in the public forum. We can't wait till everything is perfect. We have to do it now as the questions come up. And a lot of people did a lot of heroic work in those state referenda. But we found that the forces were very, very powerful, and that there was a lot of misinformation that was really hard to counter. But my hat is off to those state Catholic conferences and to those bishops and all their co-workers who tried so very, very hard. If I might add one more thing, is prayer. If we really want to create a culture of life, we have to pray for it. We have to pray about it. We have to pray privately, publicly, and constantly. This is not simply a political matter. This is a matter of a transformation that is possible, not only by reason, but also by faith, not only by our efforts, but by God's grace.
You mentioned earlier on a personal note, I think your mother is almost 103, or she's almost 103 years old. As someone who walks alongside someone who has lived such a life, walking alongside the elderly, what has that taught you in your role as pro-life chair? What does that teach you about the dignity of human life at all stages?
So I've been very blessed to have my mother for such a very long time, and God bless my dear mother. And what I've learned as Mom's gotten older, certain things she always did for all of us so beautifully and generously, she could no longer do. But we always loved her because she did so many beautiful things for us. She got older. She retained all her faculties, and she retains them still to this moment. And she has certainly grown wiser, as we pray we all will do with years. But at the end of the day, I love my mom, not for what she can do for me, but for who she is and the gift that she is from God. And that's how we have to look at one another, even when it's not a beloved mom. A gift God gives us to one another as gift.
Our existence is a gift in and of itself. Archbishop William Laurie, pro-life chair for the U.S. Bishops, thank you for your time and for your work. Thank you.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, protest in Iran. New demonstrations disrupt the streets of Tehran. Plus, the countdown resumes to launch NASA's delayed moon rocket. We are back tonight with a sharp detour and a dramatic change of heart for the man who once identified as a Korean woman and underwent 32 plastic surgeries along the way. Tonight, in part 2 of our interview, social media influencer Ollie London tells us the rest of his story, including what happened when God stepped in. I mean, you just really recently detransitioned, and you said you had a sort of a moment of reckoning in a Catholic church. Tell us about that and how God changed your life.
So I was at a point in my life where I was extremely lost. I was feeling, very sad about what I've done to myself. I was looking at myself in the mirror and I'm thinking, what have I actually become? What's happened to the real Ollie that was inside of me, Because I felt like the old me was dead. I didn't recognize that person when I look at old pictures, and I thought, why have I done this to myself? And then I was walking home one day and I saw people filing into a church. They were all smartly dressed. They were all in good spirits. I saw them walking into the church, so I thought, I got curious and I thought, let me go inside. I've always been curious about Christianity. I sat inside, I watched the service, I sang along with some of the hymns, and I just found it was a very welcoming place. All the people there were friendly, they were happy, they seemed like they're in a good place in life, and I thought, maybe I can be like that too. Maybe I can find this happiness. And then after the service, the priest actually approached me. We had a conversation. They offered me a Bible, and they made me feel welcome, and they said I was welcome back anytime. So since then, I've been going 3 times a week. I've got my own Bible. I've been studying the teachings of Jesus, and I just think there's so many good things in the Bible, about what Jesus did with the leper man. The leper was rejected from society. Jesus came to wash him when nobody else would help this person. And I almost felt that I identified with the leper in the sense that these people online, the trans lobby, they have kind of vilified me and tried to paint me out as a bad person just for sharing my story. So I thought, the teachings of Jesus were very helpful. It's all about spreading love and kindness. And, Christian people have given me so much love over the past month. And I do want to get baptized very soon and, become fully Christian.
Oh, that is wonderful. And I know that, I want to bring this up, too, that at some point you were considered somewhat of a controversial figure, and maybe even so now, in taking part in some behaviors that may be considered a little eye-raising. There was a video of you marrying a man several months ago, and a ceremony performed by a man dressed up like a topless priest. I'm curious, can you talk to us about what was happening in your life at that point and how things have changed for you, how God has helped you?
Well, firstly, I want to apologize for any of my past behaviors, because I really was a lost person. I felt like I was battling demons inside. I just felt really, really unhappy. And I feel like, I was trying to do things that were to try and make me happy, but they were actually making me feel worse inside. So, if anyone saw my past behavior or thought, it was a little bit unusual, or my identity or my surgery was a little bit weird, then I do apologize for that. I think everyone has a chance to redeem themselves. Everyone has a chance to change. I've been finding God. It's a long journey. I know I've got a long way to go, but, I hope that Christians can accept me.
And what would you say to those who may be going through struggles right now like you went through?
I would just say, be strong, stay true to yourself. Don't do anything you're going to regret. This would be my message to teenagers. Don't go through these surgeries. Don't take these puberty blockers. Don't go through hormone replacement therapy, because it's extremely harmful. And the vast majority of people that do this from a young age are going to live to regret it. They're going to be on medication for their whole life. In some cases, they will have serious illnesses, bone tissue issues. So I would just say, please, please, please don't be doing this as a kid. If you feel trapped in your body, find yourself, go to a church, go to a Catholic church, speak to a priest, and see if they can can give you advice and guidance, because I think a lot of young people these days, they're just lost. They just don't know who they are. And, you know, they see these things online and they think it's normal to have a sex change. They think that's completely normal, when it really isn't. You know, it's not a normal thing. It's a recent thing that's happened due to the education system, due to social media and other influences pushing this on kids. But I would just say, you know, be strong, love who you are, love yourself the way God made you. Don't be going under these changes. Just be happy and find love within yourself.
Well, Ollie, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you, Tracy. God bless you.
A new report says the world's population has reached an estimated 8 billion people. A project from the United Nations also says the highest growth is among developing nations in Africa. And by next year, India could overtake China as the most populous nation in the world. Well, ongoing protests in Iran closed many shops in Tehran's Grand Bazaar today. They are part of the nationwide strikes and demonstrations now entering their 8th week following the death of a young woman in police custody. Today's shop closures came amid calls for a 3-day shutdown to mark 2019 protests that authorities violently suppressed. And finally, tonight, after delays from fuel leaks and 2 hurricanes, NASA is preparing for tomorrow's liftoff of its Artemis 1 moon rocket. The space agency determined that damage from Hurricane Nicole last week poses little extra risk to the flight test. The highly awaited launch comes 50 years after NASA's famed manned missions to the moon. The new $4 billion Artemis program is named for Apollo's twin sister in Greek mythology. We thank you for watching tonight, and remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night, and God bless.